Yeah, hi everybody. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining my talk. As quite rightly mentioned, this is I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about transitioning into in-person research in a COVID world. And sadly, I cannot join you guys today, which is a bit unfortunate. But I've been following the conference sort of online, and it's been really wonderful to hear people's stories and insights and so on. So. To give you a bit of an introduction to myself, my name is Neil Patel. I am the Consumer Sensory Insight Group Lead at Nestl Dairy. It's a bit of a mouthful. Our office is based in Bern in Switzerland, where there are a lot of cows. So it fits in quite nicely with being a dairy business. And my role is part of the global R&D organization, and we support all of the businesses across the dairy, across the Nestl Dairy business, and across all the zones as well. So we support every zone and every brand within the dairy business. My team and myself, really our role is to bring the voice of the consumer to the business. And that sort of works from ideation, let's say, so really early stage innovation, all the way through to launch and even post-launch as well. So we're involved at every step of the process. And today, as I said earlier, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing maybe over the course of the last 18 months or so, when COVID sort of hit. And then also start to give you a bit of background in terms of what we have started to think about for 2022. And what we're doing and how we're sort of planning the qual work that we intend to run in 2022. So just to get started and just to give you a bit more context, these are some of our biggest brands. And as you can, and I don't know if all of these are familiar to you, they weren't to me when I first started, I'll be honest, but some of them were. But we have a lot of, our business is quite fragmented, I suppose, not only in terms of which consumer we target, but also in terms of the globe as well. Here we have Nestle Carnation, which is sweetened condensed milk and evaporated milk, which is probably quite well known, I suppose, in Europe and North America. And it's basically used quite heavily in baking, but it's also used in other contexts around the world, depending on where you are. Then we have Nesquik and Milo, which are sort of cocoa powders that you tend to mix with milk or water, again, depending on where you are. And then we have Nestle Nido and Bear Brand, which are sort of milk powders or milk drinks. And often they're fortified. And then we have sort of La Laitière, which is a sort of chilled dessert brand. So, I mean, this is not all of our brands that we cover. This is, probably a big chunk of our business, I would say. But as you can tell, the geographies are quite different, and the actual target consumer is also quite different. And then obviously within the brands, we have various sort of sub brands as well. So yeah, it's pretty complicated, let's say, and that's kind of the message I want to give you today. At the moment as well, we have a really big focus on developing markets, and we have quite a big desire as a business to really reach our what we call affordable families. So we have they're kind of spread all over the world, but the both be in the sort of three key continents, which are obviously Africa, Asia, and Latin America. So in terms of sort of what we've been doing, since COVID's hit, it's been pretty much business as usual to some extent in terms of what we've been doing. We've been conducting a lot of research, as I imagine a lot of people have been all over industry. And all of it, pretty much all of it has been done online, I'll be honest. And yeah, at first, when we sort of started transitioning to it, I was very skeptical. And yeah, I was quite surprised actually at the quality of the results and at how good the feedback and insight that we've been getting has been. We continue to run research projects, or we do all the sort of typical sort of qual and quant work, and yeah, we've been getting as close to our consumer as I imagine is possible within the sort of context of the world and the situation around COVID. So, you know, for me, it was quite interesting, of course, you know, and as I say, I was a bit nervous and skeptical and all the sort of, things that I imagine a lot of people probably were. But actually, you know, we haven't really done that much differently in terms of methods and in terms of, you know, work, doing the diaries, all those kinds of things. You know, we've really been quite busy actually. And being, you know, working from home and doing things online, it probably has allowed us to do a bit more. So that sort of takes me on then, you know, to my next slide. And apologies, I have lots of GIFs in my deck and they don't seem to be working. So these pictures might be a bit weird, but if you could see the ones with the GIFs, that would probably make a bit more sense. But yeah, you know, as I said, being quite skeptical, and then sort of in the end getting quite used to it and sort of seeing the feedback. We know that things have actually worked pretty well. And to kind of summarize a couple of the things that I think have worked really, really well, you know, consumers are quite used to doing things online. As we all are now, and it's obviously accelerated the shift. So when we talk to consumers, and whether it's, you know, using their iPhones or using laptops or whatever it is, they're pretty at home, you know, they're pretty at ease. We can have really fluid conversations. We can, really get close to them and their daily lives, and sometimes a bit more than we may have done before because of various acts of setting things up. So, you know, for me, that sort of element of it has been really, really fantastic. And the fact that they're in a familiar place as well, you know, often, you know, we talk to consumers who are at home or, you know, they might be in their office or whatever, but generally they're in quite a comfortable and familiar place. And, you know, that's also been really great at drawing out insights. You know, what I love, you know, sometimes when we talk to consumers, I mean, I remember talking to one the other day and we were talking about a particular brand and they were just like, oh, let me go get it. And they went and got the bottle and we were talking about it and we're talking about the pack and the brand and everything. So, you know, I'm not saying that that's not what we would have done before, but it seems now, by doing everything online, we're kind of feel, in some respects, we feel like we're getting a bit closer to these consumers, which is, you know, really, really great for us as a business. The other thing as well that I've noticed, and more as time has gone by, is that there are loads and loads of really fantastic online platforms. And, you know, typically before, you know, we were doing a lot of research where we relied quite heavily on agencies. And now what we've found is with this transition to sort of online, we can do a lot of the stuff ourselves. Now, yes, okay, it comes with pros and it comes with cons, but that being said, you know, it's been really great for me and my team to, you know, have a business question, find a suitable sort of online platform and then get the answer in a day or two. Whereas before, you know, when we were relying on agencies, it would have taken a lot longer. So for me, this has really been fantastic. And as I say, you know, as time's gone on, we've been noticing that there's a lot of capability coming out in terms of the various methods, in terms of, you know, translation and all of those things, which I know was sort of touched on a little bit in the talk before as well. So for me, that has really, really been, you know, very cool. And as I say about efficiency, you know, sometimes we can launch some of the surveys overnight and we'll get the data that we want the next day, or we can do some interviews and so on in the evening when people are at home, obviously depending on the time zone, and then share with the wider audience and the wider team the next day, which is really, really I would say it's a bit of a game changer, you know, to be honest. And with that, I suppose, you know, cost wise as well, you know, we obviously need to factor that in. Yes, you know, we're maybe spending a bit more time, but nonetheless, as I say, they have been quite affordable and pretty reasonable and very user friendly as well, which has really, really been great. Also from that has come, you know, we've learned a lot of new skills. In my case, maybe I've been learning some old skills as well about moderating, but, you know, learning how to use these various platforms, you know, learning how to use various sort of Google AIs, all these kind of things. I don't think we would have really been that immersed in had it not been for this sort of online great as well, you know. So I've learned a lot of platform work. I've learned a lot about how these new companies can help us get closer to the consumer. but also, you know, my team have been also much more involved, I would say, in the research, and we've been really living and breathing it, and that really makes it a lot more powerful when we go back to our stakeholders, you know, and that takes me on to this point, is that we've really had really fantastic feedback from our stakeholders across the business. We've yeah, they have also been attending the sessions as well, which is really great, which doesn't always happen, you know, especially thinking back when we were doing things face to face. You know, you often have challenges around recordings and so on, but now, because everything is done online, and also probably because people are more used to things being online, we've had really fantastic engagement from stakeholders. And for me, as a, you know, as a group lead and driving the sort of insight strategy within the business, that's been, you know, really wonderful. And as I say, it allows us to reach other people as well who may have not been so engaged in research within the business, and we can say, oh, hey, here's, you know, here's a link to a piece of work that we've done, and we can kind of share that sort of insight with them. So, you know, as a sort of whole, I think the whole process of being online has worked, you know, really well. And I think, you know, it's great for us as a team to learn about these things, and I think it will continue. You know, don't get me wrong, but I think in some aspects, I think, you know, you have to kind of draw a line, and I think, you know, you have to kind of take a bit of a step back and think, okay, well, we've kind of come maybe as far as we can come with online work. So how do we then, how do we then move back to maybe a bit of a hybrid, let's say, in this case, or a bit more face-to-face versus online? And, you know, thinking about this, you know, we were looking at you know, what are maybe, you know, I've spoken to you about all the positives, you know, and then what are the kind of drawbacks? And I think there are quite a few drawbacks, and particularly for us with the type of consumers that we want to interact with. But you know, if we think a bit broader, you know, we think about the distractions, and I'm sure you can all relate to that. But when you have a focus group, or when you have a one-to-one interview, or whatever it may be, it doesn't really matter. There's a huge amount of distractions. So yes, people are comfortable, but yeah, you know, you have the door ringing, you have people's children running around. You know, we talk to a lot of mums and dads for that matter, but a lot of time they have young children, and they're gaming. There's distractions, the deliveries are coming. So I guess, you know, as I say, you know, we can all relate to that, and we can all sympathize to that, of course. It sometimes when you're in a bit of a flow, it can sort of disrupt things. Then there's, you know, the issues around connection. You know, we can always have you know, and it doesn't even matter where you are in the world, to be honest. You know, sometimes we've spoken to people in pretty remote places, and their connection is absolutely amazing, and then you talk to somebody, you know, in the UK, and the line is really bitty and fuzzy and so on. But yeah, you know, you can't escape the fact that you are sometimes in reliance of someone's connection issues. There are ways to sort of overcome that, you know, I guess, when people are doing filming, but broadly speaking, you know, you can't really escape that in some cases. And then I know I said earlier, you know, a lot of people are comfortable, but actually what we've also found now, having been doing this for quite some time, is that we find that in certain places around the world, particularly with some of our consumers, not everybody is actually that comfortable, you know, doing things online on their phones, on their laptops, and so on. So it's a bit of a challenge, and we have sort of picked up, you know, depending on the market that we're going to work in, you know, we know that some consumers are better at articulating, you know, online, let's say, but we have also flagged a couple of markets where you know, maybe it's better to do things face to face. And, you know, again, as I said, you know, we work with a lot of mums with a lot of young children, and it's also the same for them. You know, if you go to the US and you do some work with children, you know, you want to look at them in front of the camera, they're just, you know, all of them are rock stars, you know. But if you go to other markets, children are a little bit more apprehensive, a bit more shy, so we just need to kind of watch out there, really. So that was one of the interesting things, you know, I would say that we've kind of learned. And then you also have that sort of song and dance around, you know, you being on mute, can you hear me, all of that sort of stuff as well. So that can always take a bit of time as well to get going. The other thing as well that we've found is that it can be quite difficult to share stimulus. Yes, you know, there are wonderful platforms, and you can share a lot of imagery, you can share a lot of other stuff going on. But when it comes to things like textures, when it comes to things like smells, when it comes to things like the actual product themselves, That's where we've really struggled. You know, we have tried to try and bridge the gap a little bit. We've sent, you know, parcels out to people. We've sent sort of smelling pens. We've sent sort of kind of care packages with lots of different textures and different colors and all the rest of it, you know. But it doesn't, yeah, it's very difficult, you know, to kind of do that thing. And I remember, you know, a lot of times the packages don't turn up. So it can be, yeah, a little bit challenging, let's say. And it does add, I have to say, quite a significant cost as well. So if you have to ship, you have to get all the things together, you have to really plan in advance, you have to ship them out. So there is a lot of logistics from that aspect. So that can be a little bit difficult. And then also you can't read people's body language. Now, you know, that's one of the biggest drawbacks, I would almost say, to some extent. You know, when you're in a group or when you're doing a one-to-one interview, you can really learn a lot, I think, just from people's facial expressions and their body language. And that for me is something, you know, obviously you can get tone of voice a little bit and a bit of facial expression, but not really to the same extent that if you're in the same room. So that was something that I feel that maybe is a miss, and I don't know how we overcome that. I think that's a really difficult one to to sort of think about and try and figure out a solution. And with all these different platforms as well, you know, sort of moving on, you know, yes, it's wonderful that we have a lot of great platforms, but it does take quite a bit of time to actually learn how to use them. And all of them have their own little nuances, and they're all, you know, have their own sort of quirky ways of doing things. So if you are a bit like me and you like to try lots of different things till you get to the best one, you end up spending quite a lot of time setting things up, let's say, and then when you're doing your reporting, or when you're looking at, you know, when you want to see like certain video clips from, you know, maybe 1 minute to 1.5 minutes and stuff, they all do things and they all cut things in very different ways. So that can also be you know, very time consuming, and sometimes, you know, you can invest quite a lot of effort in kind of learning these things, and then you might realize that maybe it's not quite the one for you because it lacks a particular analysis tool or whatever. And then, you know, I think, and maybe we can all relate to this, I suppose, to some extent. But I think there is an element at the moment of online fatigue. You know, we're slowly starting to transition back into the office. You know, you guys are, a lot of you are there face to face, and I think it's really wonderful to do that. And I think now we're getting to the stage where, you know, countries are maybe sort of opening up, and I say that in sort of inverted commas. So people are almost getting a bit bored and a bit fed up of spending all their time online, and I'm slowly starting to see that, you know, not only with my consumers but also with my stakeholders as well. So I'm slowly starting to see my sort of attendance list go from being quite high to quite low, and people are now the engagement levels are maybe not quite there that they were before. So that's also something that we kind of need to maybe think about and manage a bit more effectively. So, you know, one of the questions, I guess, that we've been asking ourselves, you know, is, you know, face-to-face, you know, versus online. And this is really what I wanted to sort of share with you about what we've been thinking, and to share with you a little bit about our sort of trail of thought and kind of where we are as a team. I mean, I guess the first thing that we really need to think about when we are looking at going back to face-to-face is, you know, are the insights that we generate, are they going to be more powerful face-to-face versus, you know, online? Now, for me, I remember this quite vividly. You know, we went to Indonesia, and we were talking to these sort of, I don't want to say teenagers, they were about 18 or 19, and we're talking to them about Milo. And they were kind of, I mean, they loved the brand. They were really, you know, positive about it. And then they said, oh, you know what we love doing with Milo is we love ironing it. So we get an iron, we iron it, and we turn it from a powder into this chocolate bar. And I mean, that was incredible because we'd never ever heard of that before. And then you only got to then go online into some of the forums and stuff, and you slowly start to see that it is a big thing. And I don't think we would have found that out online. I think the fact that we were, you know, in home with these young kids, I think they really felt like they wanted to share that sort of insight with us. So that's probably for me one of the biggest questions is, do we get better and more powerful insights? And when we share this then with the business, the business go, oh my God, that's a really fantastic piece of insight. And it is also a big opportunity for us because obviously, we need to see where, what that is. So for me, that was, quite fascinating. And I haven't quite had many of those sort of aha moments, let's say, or found many of those golden nuggets while doing things online. So obviously it's impossible to judge. But I do think there is a chance that we could be missing something that is quite insightful and quite powerful. And then I guess the next point is, do we get closer to our consumers' reality? Now, one of the things I've often struggled with is finding some of the sort of demographics that we work with, particularly in some of our developing markets, doing things online. So actually what's happened is we just haven't spoken to them, which I think is a real shame and a really big miss, and we've been going to Africa, we've been going to Brazil, most Asia, it doesn't really matter, and we've been talking to maybe the consumers who not quite our target market, and then expecting to kind of really understand what they go through and really start to understand how they live their lives. And that's just something that you just cannot do online, I don't think. And I think for me, thinking about some of the work that we're doing next year, that's where I really feel that doing it face to face and having somebody, on the ground is really going to bring value, not only to the business, but also to my team to really learn and really feel the consumers, in their market stores, in their houses, learning about consumers, who own these market stores in Africa, and they buy a big sort of 5 kilo pouch of milk powder, and then they separate it themselves so that they can then sell it to the consumer at an affordable price, and the consumer comes back every single day. And that's not something you can kind of pick up online because you probably wouldn't be talking to those people. So for me, that's also a really big thing to consider. And then I guess moving on maybe to the next point around creativity, when we obviously do a lot of ideation, we do a lot of co-creation, we spend a lot of time with consumers. Do we sort of hinder the creativity when we're online? I know when I'm in a workshop, sometimes you can switch off, you can check your emails, and yeah, I don't know the answer actually. And I think we've had a lot of really fantastic workshops, and we've had a lot of co-creations, sessions with kids even, and with adults that have worked really wonderfully well. But I just wonder, I just have this sort of niggly feeling that I'm not sure if we can get the same levels of creativity when we're all online versus when we are together. But that is something again that we need to factor in when we are doing this type of work. And the last one, I guess, is probably one of the most important ones as well to some extent. Is sort of the cost implications. It does cost a lot more money to have field work happening, face to face on the ground. People have to travel. It takes significantly more time, let's say. So there's a bit of a conundrum, I suppose, within my team around all of these things. How do we start to pick and choose where we think online is best versus say face to face? And really what I'd love also as well is to kind of hear other people's thoughts on this as well, because I'm sure we're not the only ones going through this sort of process now where things are beginning to transition more from online to face to face. So I guess that's the end of my talk, I suppose. And thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate that. And yeah, I'd really love to sort of hear your thoughts and get your questions and answer anything that you guys may have.
Thank you very much, Neil. So are there any questions?
Hi there. I'm not an eco-warrior, but you didn't mention anything about the cost of the planet of travel and whether your children put pressure on you and saying, why do you need to go to the airport, daddy or mummy? Is that a consideration at all for you?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think it is something that we all need to think about and take responsibility for sure. You know, I'll probably sit on the fence on that one in terms of forward answer. I think it is quite tricky because, yeah, you know, do I need to travel to all these various places to speak to these consumers? Probably not. But then on the other hand, you know, as I said, you know, trying to reach consumers who are in the sort of lower sort of C2, D2 social and economic classes is very, very difficult online. I'm not sure if anybody has tried that, but we can't get hold of anybody in a lot of cases. So I think it's just about finding that balance. But I completely agree with your point. You know, we do need to think about the sustainability side of things as well as a business. And I don't believe that things will return to kind of, you know, the way things were before. But that being said, you know, if there is a business need, then, you know, maybe a bit of travel is required.
Can I jump to another question? To answer the question, face-to-face versus digital, a large company like Nestl could engage on research, where you could have the same objective, almost the same participants, and then compare the granularity, the depth of insights and responses face-to-face versus online. Is this something you've done or you would consider in future to get to these answers of these fascinating questions?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously, it's something that I'm sure a lot of companies are looking at the moment. And yeah, one of the sort of challenges, let's say, with that, and it is something we've explored, you know. So to be fully transparent, we are looking into it. Is that people's mindsets have changed quite significantly during the period of COVID. So I think it's very difficult to compare. It's not really an apples to apples comparison, but we are at a stage, you know, where we're finding that the data is quite comparable. So I think once we have more data to confidently say, well, look, you know, in this market, there is really no point going face to face based on X, Y, and Z questions, then, you know, we obviously wouldn't go face to face. It would be a complete waste of time and money, etc. So obviously, we're building that sort of knowledge internally. But until we get to the really nitty gritty of yes versus no, it's very difficult to make that choice. And I think, as I say, I think a lot of companies are probably exploring it as well. And, you know, we'd be more than happy to look at how we can be better and be faster at that as well. Because, yeah, with anything, it does take a bit of time and a bit of effort because it's obviously not our core focus. So, yeah, you know, we'd be happy to collaborate and think about how we collaborate on that as well.
Thank you very much, Neil. Okay, are there any questions left?
There is actually a question from the virtual chat. Give me a second, I will read it aloud. How did you manage to carry out shop-alongs and ethnography with COVID restrictions? How did you perform it online? These are the only main methodologies I am missing as a qual researcher. That's from Chiara.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I guess it depends obviously on the markets. And I think what was interesting was, particularly with COVID, you know, different markets were hit quite hard at different times. So for us, because we have a very sort of global reach, you know, and actually most of our business isn't actually in Europe as well. It was actually not too bad. So when Europe was going through, you know, really massive waves where there was big restrictions on, you know, going to supermarkets and so on, and people were then transitioning to online, we were still working with people, you know, in places like Asia, where the restrictions were not quite so bad. So, you know, a lot of the times we had to get people to self-film. So obviously it's not really the same as a proper traditional shop along, let's say. But we found that actually the results were pretty good. And if you can find consumers who are, you know, really comfortable in front of the camera and really articulate, you could get some really cool results. And we had fantastic footage of people sort of filming themselves sort of traveling, like getting in tuk-tuks, going to the markets, filming themselves buying stuff and then coming home. And it's, you know, okay, it's not perfect, but it is a way that you can kind of, you can kind of get close to consumers. The other thing as well, what we found is that there are companies that sort of can give cameras to people and say, right, here's a camera, and then they help them set it up, you know, sort of virtually, and then the camera sort of stays there. So for thinking, a bit more immersively. You know, you can just film somebody's kitchen, you know, at a mealtime, for example. Generally for us, it's breakfast. And okay, you know, it's not perfect, but again, it does bridge the gap a little bit. So none of these methods are, you know, completely bulletproof, I would say, because obviously, you know, you can't be there, and you are in reliance of the consumer themselves setting things up properly. And obviously, sometimes when people are filming themselves, they can, yeah, you know, we've noticed that people have spotless kitchens, for example, when they film, which we know in reality is not the case, for example. So you do have to take that with a pinch of salt. But yeah, you know, depending on what you want to do, there are ways around it. And again, you know, this is the whole conversation we're having as well, you know, is whether when you go face to face or whether you do things online, you know, what's the balancing act, and what's the pro and what's the con.
Okay. Thank you very much, Neil. Take care of yourself.
Thank you very much.